Quabba, welcome back. Okay, we left off looking at Genesis chapter 4, verses 17 through 23, and then I'm going to read 25 through 26. Cain had intercourse with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. He became the founder of a city and gave the city the name of his son, Enoch. Enoch fathered Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech married two women. The name of the first was Adah, and the name of the second was Zillah. Adah gave birth to Jabal, and he was the ancestor of tent-dwelling herdsmen. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the ancestor of all who play the harp and the pipe. As for Zillah, she gave birth to Tubal Cain, and he was the ancestor of all who work copper and iron. So what's this scripture about? Every mythological story talks about culture, social norms, and traditions. And so this part of the story is just helping us to understand what the social norms were, and as it relates to marriage, relationships, you could have two wives. That was their social order. But it also speaks to roles and responsibilities. So it's telling you some people took care of cattle, they were herdsmen, they were tent dwellers. Some people were musicians, they played the harp and the pipe. Some people were smiths, they worked with copper and iron. So it's touching on what was valuable and important in society and in the culture of that group of people during that time. Okay, but every myth talks about cultural norms, social traditions, roles, responsibilities. All those things are inherent. And then in the last part of that scripture, verses 25 and verse 26, it says Adam. And this is the first time they mention the man's name. Adam had intercourse with his wife, and she gave birth to a son whom she named Seth. Because God has granted me other offspring, she said, in place of Abel, since Cain has killed him. A son was also born to Seth, and named him Enosh. This man was the first to invoke the name Yahweh. Okay, so here you have three generations. And the third generation is the generation that came up with the name for God known as Yahweh. Okay, so even though the name was used earlier in the story, said Yahweh God all through the story, but they're telling you the origins of the name, where that name came from, and how it became a part of their religious tradition. So the myth talks about religious traditions, social norms, customs. It talks about cultural traditions. All those things are woven into the fabric of every mythological story. That's why the meaning of the story is not literal. It's in the symbolism. It's in the symbols. Okay. So the story of Cain and Abel, if you had to sum it all up, what does it teach us? It teaches us about the importance of learning to master the lower self and to live more in tune with our higher self. Cain represented the lower self, Abel represented the higher self in the story. And people get into all this literal stuff. Why did God like one offering and didn't like the other? Oh, that's foolishness. The story is not about that. Both characters in the story are us. We all Cain and Abel. We got part Cain and we got part Abel. We got a lower self, we got a higher self. We got to learn how to balance the two. And when you let your lower self take over, you have killed your higher self. We kill our higher self all the time for less than an offering. Because we just woke up having a bad day. So we're going to give everybody else, we're going to slay everybody else's higher self. Help us, Holy Spirit. So we are all Cain and Abel. And there are lessons to be learned. The story of Cain and Abel teaches us divine law about the deadly consequences of egocentricity. When we make ourselves the most important thing, when we act like we are the center of the universe, like the world's supposed to bow down to us. That's how Cain was acting, like my offering is better. You can't see that? God showed him what he could see. So the story is trying to teach us. The moral in that story is, if left unchecked, the negative consequences of unbridled individualism can diminish and destroy the quality and the fabric of life on earth. And as we see today, when individualism is not held in check, we can destroy the whole planet. Isn't that what man has done in the last 100 years? We destroyed, polluted the water, the land, the earth, the weather is all out of whack. That's unbridled individual. That's why African people understood the importance of spirit and the importance of spirituality. That's the only thing that can hold the lower self in check. That's the only thing that can keep us balanced and keep us whole and keep us in harmony and in alignment with divine will and God's created earth, world. So in traditional African society, they had something, and I put this in the handout because you need to understand why African society set itself up the way it did. In traditional African society, one of the major points in an individual's life had to do with the formal process of initiation. So from birth to death, you had to go through these periods of initiation because the spirit had to evolve. It had to be nurtured, and to get there, you got to go through initiation. And life is full of initiation, whether we know it or not, formally or informally. We're always going through initiation. COVID is initiation. We're all being initiated to a higher consciousness, even though we don't know it consciously. The earth, the world, God is trying to tell us something. What is it that God is trying to tell us through this initiation? If we come out on the other side of COVID the same way we went into it, the world is going, I can't even imagine. We're supposed to come out wiser and better and stronger through this initiation that we've been going through for the last 3 months, and it ain't over yet. They say the over 20 states have an elevated COVID, the spread of it. Initiation, though, is a mark of unity and identification. It helps us to remember that we're all in it together, and it helps us to remember what our individual and collective purpose is. That's the identification with one another and with our higher self. And so for African people, traditional Africa, initiation was primary. It was the most deeply religious observance, each initiatory experience. So you had the initiation that started with childbirth. And then after that, it was the naming ceremony. And then after that, all through the child's youth, there were initiations. And then at age 12, another initiation. Then at 18, you become a parent. Then you become a grandparent. Then you become a great. All through your life, you're going through initiation. And each time, you're supposed to come out better. So initiatory experiences are critical to the awakening of spiritual consciousness. Why did I share all of this? Because that's what those stories are talking about. Adam and Eve went through initiation. Cain and Abel went through initiation. All their descendants went through initiation. The story of Noah is about initiation. Initiation by water. The Tower of Babel is about initiation. So these initiatory observances are critical because they help us to understand who we are and why we are here. And the Bible is literally filled with examples of initiatory events, both personal and corporate, from Genesis to Revelations. Moses went through initiation. Joshua went through initiation. Caleb, all through the Bible. They're going through initiation over and over and over. Okay, but I'm trying to give you another lens to look at the scriptures. So these stories have meaning way beyond the literal interpretation that we give to the stories because of our Western conditioning. We don't see the higher meaning in the story. But I gave you, I know you think at this point that I forgot about homework and asking questions and giving you assignment. I didn't. I just put it all together in one place this time. So I gave you some spiritual food for thought. I have 5 questions that I want you to answer and reflect on, think about. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's where you are on your spiritual journey. So my first question was, why was Abel's sacrifice acceptable to Yahweh while Cain's was not? And I really already gave you that answer. My bad on that one. But I still would like to know your thought about it. Why Abel's sacrifice was acceptable and Cain's was not. Second question, why did Yahweh put a mark on Cain's head? I didn't talk about the mark on Cain. Why did God put a mark on Cain? And I might have read that when I was reading from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, but I want you to answer that question. Why did God put a mark on Cain? Third question, what was the purpose? What was the lesson of Cain's punishment? What was Cain supposed to take away from that punishment? What are we to take away from that punishment? And again, my clue that I'm going to give you is it's got something to do with divine law. Okay? It's about divine law. The fourth question is, what kind of initiatory experience is being related in the story of Cain and Abel? What kind of initiatory experience? What are they being initiated into? And then my last question is, what is necessary to hold human selfishness, greed, self-obsession, and individualism in check? And I really kind of touched on that too, but I still want to know your feelings about that. What do we need? What does society need to do to keep human individualism in check? Okay, so get at me with those reflections and what the Spirit says to you about those things, deep divers. Let me know. Let me know. Deep divers, one of our primary goals in this life is to fully develop the ability to use our spiritual and metaphysical powers above and beyond our intellect and our physical ability. And this is why you got to revisit these stories. That's why they're so important, because we can never forget what's most important in life. And especially living in a material culture, materialistic, capitalistic, individualistic culture where we're always being bombarded all day and all night with material things. What the newest thing is, what we need to consume. And we forget about the spirit. We forget about the mind. We're so focused on the material, the lower self. We forget about the higher self. So we're not on a journey to become our best selves. That's what initiation is for. So we can become our higher selves. Become who we already are. So in essence, the story is trying to tell us that in essence we are destined to live by the Spirit and not just by our physical or intellectual faculties. The total reintegration of mind, body, and spirit is the ultimate transformational process available for seekers who choose to follow in the footsteps of our standard-bearing revolutionary example, Jesus of Nazareth. And so, in our church, we've understood for years that the Christian journey is about becoming fully whole, integrating the mind, the body, and the spirit, and becoming our higher selves, becoming, as we say now, our best selves. That's what the journey is about. So if Christianity is not making you better, if it's not helping you to move from individualism to a higher communal self, then you're just going through motions. Because you can quote the scriptures and jump pews don't make you whole. That doesn't make you whole. I'm sorry to bust your bubble. It doesn't make you any closer to God. God don't really care how many scriptures you know. It's how you live. It's what you do Not what you know, not, and it's definitely not what you say, because the mouth will say anything. The mouth will say anything. But it's about transformation. It's any religion. The journey of religion is to transform you from the inside out. It's supposed to transform you from the inside out, mind, body, and spirit. So in our church, we understand that, and we utilize the ancient spiritual disciplines that were rediscovered by our beloved founder and first Holy Patriarch, the Honorable Jaramogi Abebe Ajiman, also known as Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr. in the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. He taught us the science of Chui, the Christian science of renewal and rebirth. And through that process, you can be born again. See, for us, it's not rhetoric, I'm born again. No, we went through a process for years to discover the fullness of life and what that means. And that's why today, even in the midst of the kind of chaos and confusion that's going on in the world, we can still find that peace through the practice of the spiritual disciplines. Fasting, meditation, prayer, yoga, tai chi, do-in, movement, massage, all of these spiritual disciplines can be used to make us whole. Nothing that is not in harmony with the whole can survive for long or flourish. That's why you got to stay in the spiritual realm. That's why you got to stay connected to the spiritual realm. So everything that we do has to tie us back into that. So we don't get too comfortable in the physical and the material realm and the lower self. Okay, so that's the journey that we're on. That's the journey every Christian is supposed to be on. The journey is to renewal and rebirth. And God knows if COVID ain't calling for anything else, it's calling for some transformation. It's calling for some renewal and some rebirth. And my fear is that too many people are not going to answer the call, not even going to hear the call. So busy, distracted by all the foolishness that's going on, all of it. And that's the thing about transformation. It encompasses everything, every level. That's why we're dealing with the police violence. That's not new, but it's stirred up because everything else is stirred up. From the president on down, everything is stirred up. And it's not, we focus on what's happening here, but it's not just here. It's everywhere. Show me a government that's handling their business, looking out for the needs of the people, and trying to do right and justice and treat people the way they ought to be treated. Trump is just the worst of the worst, but I know 20 other Trumps by other names. Just abusive and selfish and self-destructive. And I've been saying this for 20 years, that America is becoming more and more like any third world country. Pick one where the government is totally run by crooks, and we've been becoming that for the last 20 years. This didn't happen overnight. And let me stop. See, this is why I want to talk about other things, because I like to tie things together. Because we look at what's going on and we don't see the connection. We don't see how it relates to the whole thing. And so we miss really what we're supposed to get out of it, what we're supposed to take away from it, what we're supposed to learn from it, what we're supposed to pass on to our children and our children's children. So I hope this journey into Genesis has been helpful, and that you got a new perspective on those stories. Creation, Adam and Eve, the fall of man, Cain and Abel. Next week I'll probably dive into Noah, because Noah is here now. We're going through Noah right now. Even though we don't know we in flood times. We connect flood times with water, but it don't have to be water. We could be flooded with evil and all kind of stuff. It don't have to be water necessarily. But we'll talk about Noah next week. So again, thank you for joining me. And again, I am going to be introducing a new platform for my classroom, and I hope you are willing to stay on board. Tell other people, share it. Don't just keep it to yourself. Invite other people to come and be a part. We got to grow our consciousness so we can transform our ugly reality and make it into something whole, beautiful, better. Ashe and amen.